I stepped out of the Uber, still buzzing from the biggest win of my career, and froze. Lined up at the end of the driveway were black trash bags, at least a dozen, bulging with my things. They looked like funeral monuments, each one a grave marker for another part of my life. My mom stood there, arms crossed, her gardening apron still on. Beside her were my 3 siblings, shoulder to shoulder like a firing squad. Not one of them smiled. I clutched my carry-on, still holding the silk scarf I'd bought for my mom in Los Angeles. I'd imagined draping it around her shoulders, telling her about the $1 million pitch I'd just landed. I'd imagined maybe, just maybe, she'd finally be proud. Instead, she stepped back when I moved toward her. "Don't get comfortable," she said flatly. "You're not staying here tonight." My name is Leah Harrison. I'm 25 years old, the youngest of 4 in what used to be a picture-perfect Texas family. My dad died when I was 7. I have fragments of memories. The smell of his aftershave, the way he'd hum when he grilled in the backyard. My siblings remember so much more. Jackson, the oldest, was already 18 when Dad passed. Natalie was 16. Kevin was 14. They'd had a whole childhood with him. I barely got a chapter. When Dad died, my mom, Sandra, changed. She hardened like cooling steel. She started measuring love in terms of achievement, obedience, and how well we fit her idea of success. Jackson became a surgeon. Natalie became a corporate attorney. Kevin was an engineer before 30. They all married the right people, bought houses in neighborhoods she approved of, and had kids on schedule. Then there was me, the black sheep. I studied marketing instead of medicine or law. I took a job at a scrappy startup instead of some legacy firm. I stayed single. Mom never came out and said I was a disappointment, but she didn't need to. Every Sunday dinner was a reminder. When are you going to get a real job? Your sister was already making 6 figures at your age. After college, I moved back home. The rent in Austin was sky high, and my entry-level salary barely covered student loans. Mom had said, "Stay as long as you need. Family supports family." That was the bait. The hook? I paid her rent, bought groceries, cleaned, did yard work, drove her to appointments, fixed her tech problems, and listened to hours of her venting. My siblings? They never saw that side. When they were around, Mom was warm, composed, the martyr who had given up everything for us. And when there was any family disagreement, they'd form a wall with her on the other side of it. "You'll understand when you have more life experience," Jackson would say, as if the 4 years I spent living on my own during college or traveling for work didn't count. I stayed because it was practical. I thought, if I kept my head down, saved my money, and advanced my career, I'd eventually earn her respect. And then came my big break. Our company landed a massive Los Angeles client, and I was chosen to lead the pitch. Weeks of prep, sleepless nights, rehearsing until I could say it in my sleep. The trip went better than I'd ever dreamed. The client loved our campaign. My boss took me to dinner, hinted at a promotion. For once, someone saw me as capable, not as the kid who didn't measure up. I flew home, believing I'd walk through that front door and find my family beaming. Instead, I found my life on the curb, standing there on that perfect Texas spring afternoon. I realized I wasn't walking into a celebration. I was walking into an ambush. Looking back, I can't say the bags on the driveway came out of nowhere. The truth is, the tension had been building for years, woven into every holiday meal, every casual conversation that turned into an interrogation about my choices. After Dad died, Mom's grip on our lives tightened. She decided which colleges we applied to, what majors were acceptable, and even the kind of people we were allowed to date. My siblings played along. Maybe it was easier for them. Their dreams happened to match hers. Medicine, law, engineering. Neat little boxes she could brag about to her friends at church. Mine didn't. When I chose marketing, she didn't hide her disappointment. "It's not a real profession," she'd mutter while chopping vegetables. "You're smart enough for something better." Better, in her vocabulary, meant something that impressed the ladies at Sunday service. By the time I graduated, I knew Austin's rent would eat my entire paycheck. Mom offered what sounded like a lifeline. "Stay here, save your money, get ahead." It wasn't a gift. It was a contract I never signed. Within weeks, I was paying her rent. Not much less than I'd pay a roommate. I bought half the groceries, handled laundry, yard work, and cleaning. If she needed a ride to a doctor's appointment, I was the driver. If her phone froze, I was the IT department. And when she wanted to unload about her coworkers or the neighbors, I was the audience. She never asked my brothers or sister to do any of that. When they visited, it was all hugs and, "You're doing so well." I was the invisible scaffolding holding her life together, and nobody noticed. The conversations at Sunday dinner became a slow bleed on my self-worth. "When will you start a real career?" Natalie was making twice your salary at 25. Kevin already owned a house at your age. I tried to shrug it off, but it wore me down. I kept telling myself it was temporary. I was saving for my own place. I was building my resume. I could endure the comments if it meant stability later. Then, one night, a few weeks before the Los Angeles trip, I heard something I wasn't supposed to. I was coming in from the garage when I heard her voice in the kitchen, low and clipped. She was on the phone with someone. "It'll be easier when she's gone." The words stopped me cold. I stayed in the shadows, heart pounding. She didn't say my name, but who else could she mean? My siblings had long since moved out. The rest of the call was muffled, but the tone was sharp, decisive. She was making plans that didn't include me. I wanted to ask her about it right then. Instead, I pretended I hadn't heard. I told myself maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it was about something else. But the way she hung up when she noticed me, the quick, fake smile, told me I hadn't. From that moment on, a tiny ember of suspicion burned in my chest. I didn't know what she was planning, but I had the sinking feeling it would hurt. I just didn't realize how much. When our firm landed the Los Angeles account, I thought maybe, finally, things were turning. It was the kind of client that could put our small agency on the map. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, my boss picked me to lead the pitch. Weeks of prep blurred together. Early mornings, late nights, endless rehearsals until I could run through every slide in my sleep. I wanted it perfect, not just for me, but because I thought, if I nailed this, maybe my family would see me differently. Maybe Mom would look at me the way she looked at Jackson in his white coat, or Natalie in her tailored suit. The trip was everything I hoped for. I walked into that glass-walled conference room on the 32nd floor with a knot in my stomach and walked out with a signed agreement worth 7 figures. The clients didn't just like the campaign. They loved it. My boss took me to dinner that night at a rooftop place with string lights and skyline views, over grilled salmon and overpriced wine. He leaned back and said, "You've got real talent, Leah. If this launch goes the way I think it will, there's a leadership position waiting for you." That night in my hotel room, I cried, not because I was sad, but because someone finally saw my worth without comparing me to anyone else. The next day, I carved out time to pick up gifts, a silk scarf for Mom, a pen Natalie could use in court, a rare craft beer for each of my brothers. Silly maybe. But I wanted them to know I'd been thinking about them, even on the busiest trip of my life. The flight home was smooth. I stared out the window, imagining Saturday afternoon in the backyard. Mom holding up the scarf, smiling, telling my siblings, "See, she's doing well." I pictured Jackson nodding, Natalie putting away the job listing she kept sending me. For the first time in years, I let myself believe that kind of moment was possible. Halfway from the airport, my phone lit up with Jackson's name. He almost never calls me directly. I swiped to answer. "Hey, I just landed. Where are you right now?" His tone was clipped, almost formal. In the car, heading home." "Why?" Pause. "Too long. Mom wants to talk to you when you get here." "We all do." Something in the way he said it made my stomach drop. "About what? Is someone sick?" "Just get home, Leah." And then he hung up. I stared at my phone like it might explain what just happened. Called Natalie, no answer. Texted Kevin, no answer. I sent a message to our group chat. "Is everything okay?" The read receipts popped up, but no one replied. That's when I remembered the phone call I'd overheard weeks ago. "It'll be easier once she's gone." My driver glanced in the rear view. "Everything all right, miss?" "Just family stuff," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The rest of the ride felt longer than the entire flight from LA. I told myself I was overreacting. Told myself it was nothing, but deep down, I already knew. Whatever was waiting for me at home wasn't pride or congratulations. It was something else. The driver turned onto our street, and nothing looked out of place at first. Kids on bikes, neighbors walking dogs, the kind of quiet Austin Saturday that makes you forget the rest of the world exists. And then I saw them. The black trash bags were lined up like a barricade near the front gate. At least a dozen, swollen with my life. Behind them, 4 figures stood shoulder to shoulder. Mom in her faded gardening apron, Jackson in jeans and a polo, Natalie in one of her perfect business casual dresses, Kevin in a hoodie with his college logo. "Stop here," I told the driver, my voice flat. I handed him cash, grabbed my carry-on and laptop bag, and stepped out. The air felt heavier than it should have. None of them moved toward me. None of them smiled. "What's going on?" I asked, walking closer. My eyes darted between the bags. "What is all this?" Mom stepped forward, her mouth set in a thin line. "Your things are packed. It's time for you to find your own place." I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "What? Why? We never discussed." "You're 25. All your siblings were out by 23. Her tone was as cold as the look on her face. Jackson crossed his arms. "It's time you learned responsibility." My jaw tightened. "I've been paying rent. I've been working full-time. I've been—" "Excuses," Natalie cut in, glancing at her watch like she had somewhere better to be. Kevin stayed quiet, his eyes shifting between us. "Why now?" I asked. "Why today? Without any warning?" "I've been hinting for months," Mom said. "Hinting is not the same as telling your daughter you're kicking her out while she's on a business trip." I shot back. My voice was shaking now, more from anger than shock. Normal people talk about these things. They don't ambush someone and throw their life into trash bags. Jackson took a step toward me. "Don't raise your voice to Mom." That's when the absurdity hit me. Being told to respect the people who were showing me none. And then it happened. Kevin shifted uncomfortably, like the words were burning his tongue before they even left. "Just tell her, Mom." "Tell me what?" I demanded. "She sold the house," he blurted out. My stomach dropped. Natalie's head snapped toward him. "Kevin, what?" She deserves to know, he said. I turned to Mom. You're selling the house? She didn't flinch. My financial decisions are none of your concern. They are if it means making me homeless with no notice, I fired back. Natalie's voice was syrupy but sharp. You have a job. Get an apartment like everyone else. And my share? I asked quietly. Dad's will left the house to all of us. No one answered. The silence was louder than shouting. That was the moment it all clicked. This wasn't about helping me grow up or learning responsibility. It was about money. About cutting me out before I could claim my part. They hadn't just packed my things. They'd erased me. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the four of them, my so-called family, as if looking hard enough might make one of them blink, crack, admit this was a mistake. No one did. My hands felt strangely steady as I wheeled my carry-on to the curb. You want me gone? Fine. Leah, Kevin started, but I cut him off. Save it. I popped the hatch on my car, which, thankfully, had been parked on the street while I was gone. One by one, I started loading the trash bags. Clothes, books, electronics. My whole life reduced to plastic and duct tape. Where will you go? Natalie asked, her tone flat, almost curious. Not your concern, I said. Mom's voice followed me like a shadow. We're doing this for your own good. I almost laughed. By cutting my legs out from under me? Sure, I'll send you a thank you card. When the last bag was crammed into the back, I shut the hatch and turned to face them. By the way, I just landed the biggest client in our firm's history. I was about to be promoted. I brought you gifts. I shook my head. But I see now, I could have handed you the moon, and it still wouldn't be enough. Jackson's jaw tightened. Kevin looked at the ground. Mom didn't say a word. Enjoy your sale, I said. I hope the money's worth it. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away without looking back. My eyes burned, but I didn't let the tears fall until the street curved out of sight. I drove with no plan. No destination, just away. My phone buzzed again and again, but I ignored it until one name lit the screen. Zoe, my college roommate, my best friend. When I told her what happened, her voice was sharp with anger. Get here now. Tyler and I will clear out the spare room. 30 minutes later, I was unloading the same trash bags into her tiny Austin apartment. No judgment, no questions, just open arms and a made-up bed. That first night, I lay in the unfamiliar room, surrounded by my life in garbage bags, and cycled through shock, grief, rage. Every few minutes, my phone lit up, Mom saying I was overreacting, Jackson lecturing me on responsibility, Natalie sending apartment listings miles out of my budget. Kevin's text was the only one with a hint of regret. I'm sorry for how it went down. They're toxic, Zoe said when I showed her the messages. Family doesn't do this. Not real family. I wanted to argue. They were still my blood. But maybe blood wasn't enough. The next 10 days were a blur of apartment hunting. Austin's rental market was brutal. Proof of income, 3 times the rent. Perfect credit, 2 months deposit, references. I didn't have the history landlords wanted. My modest savings, which had seemed solid living at home, shrank fast between application fees and rejected offers. Finally, I found it. A tiny studio in a rundown building in a neighborhood no one bragged about. The paint peeled. The fridge rattled. But the landlord didn't care about my lack of references. Just the bigger deposit I scraped together. It wasn't much, but it was mine. 2 weeks after I moved in, my boss called me into his office. The LA pitch sealed it, he said. We're promoting you to lead the digital team. 15% raise. The same job my family dismissed as not real had just become my lifeline. The studio apartment wasn't much. A single room with peeling paint, a fridge that groaned like it was in pain, and neighbors who argued loud enough for the whole block to hear. But when I turned the key that first night, I felt something I hadn't in years. Control. No one could pack my things without asking. No one could tell me when to come home, or compare me to siblings who'd been playing by a different set of rules their whole lives. Zoe came over with grocery bags. Tyler brought over a spare coffee maker, and within a week, my mismatched collection of donated furniture and thrift store finds started to feel like a home. We ate pizza off paper plates on the floor, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed without checking who was watching. But the financial reality hit hard. After rent, utilities, and groceries, there was almost nothing left. I built spreadsheets, tracked every dollar, learned which grocery store had eggs on sale and which one doubled coupons. Some nights, dinner was just pasta and whatever sauce I could throw together. But it was my dinner, in my kitchen, on my terms. Work became my anchor. I poured everything into the Los Angeles account, making sure the launch was flawless. My boss noticed. One afternoon, he called me into his office. "You've been putting in serious hours," he said. "The LA pitch sealed it. I want you to lead the digital team. 15% raise." I walked out of his office with my heart pounding. The same career my family had sneered at had just saved me. Outside of work, I started therapy. At first, I felt ridiculous. Wasn't this something other people needed, not me? But in that quiet office, with someone who didn't judge or dismiss me, the truth started to spill out. The constant comparisons, the subtle digs, the way love from my mom always felt conditional, like I had to earn my place in the family. My therapist nodded. "That's emotional manipulation, Leah. It's not normal, and it's not your fault." I left those sessions lighter, as if I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying so long I didn't even feel it anymore. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. I stopped explaining my choices to people who weren't listening. I also started dating again. Carefully. That's how I met Daniel, a graphic designer who worked with my agency on a campaign. He was easy to talk to. Funny without being cruel, confident without needing to prove anything. On our third date, he asked about my family. I hesitated, then gave him the short version. His answer was simple. "They sound toxic. I'm sorry you went through that." No defense of, "But they're family." No blaming me, just understanding. Life was far from perfect, but it was mine. Then, 6 months after the driveway ambush, my phone lit up one night. Not with one text, not 5, dozens, all from my mom. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? After everything I've done for you, I need to talk to you. This is an emergency. Please call me." The last one stopped me cold. "I made a mistake. I need your help." I didn't answer her texts that night. I just sat there on my couch, phone buzzing like a wasp in the room, staring at her words until they blurred. The next morning, I called the one sibling who might give me the truth, Kevin. "She lost everything," he said after a long sigh. Piece by piece, it came out. Mom had sold the family house for a hefty profit. Instead of investing, she'd handed the money to a financial advisor from a church acquaintance. It was a scam. He vanished with her savings and those of at least 10 other people. "That's terrible," I said. And I meant it. But the question slipped out before I could stop it. "Why call me?" Another pause. Jackson and Natalie aren't speaking to her. She promised them part of the money, and they already spent it in their heads. Vacation home, remodel. Now they're furious. I almost laughed at the symmetry of it. The woman who'd shut me out of her decisions was now shut out by her other children. There's more, Kevin said. She has nowhere to live. The new owners moved in last week. She's been in a motel. Funds are running out. She mentioned your new apartment. My stomach turned cold. You're telling me she wants to move in with me? She's desperate, Leah. Desperate didn't erase what she'd done. Still, I could hear the weight in his voice. This wasn't just gossip. He was asking me to do something. I told him I'd think about it. Then I called my therapist. We talked boundaries. Guilt. The difference between helping someone and enabling them. By the end of the session, I knew what I could live with. We met at a coffee shop 2 days later. Daniel came with me, but sat at a table across the room, keeping his promise to step in if I needed an exit. Mom looked smaller than I remembered. The sharp posture, the perfect hair, gone. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, minimal makeup, hands wrapped tight around her coffee cup. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice, already trembling. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," I said honestly. Silence stretched between us. Then she broke it. "I lost everything. The house, the money, everything. Jackson and Natalie won't speak to me. They say I betrayed them." I nodded once. "And now?" Her eyes glistened. "I need help. I have nowhere to go. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the chance to prove my worth. Now, I saw it for what it was. A request from the same person who'd thrown me out with zero notice. "Do you understand what you did to me?" I asked quietly. "I was trying to help you become independent. By packing my things in garbage bags while I was gone? By ambushing me in the driveway? By selling the house without telling me?" Her lips pressed tight. I may have handled it poorly, but my intentions were good. I almost laughed. "Your intentions don't erase the consequences. I had to rebuild my life from nothing, and now you're asking me to risk that." She stared at me, waiting. "I'll help you find affordable senior housing. I'll contribute a small monthly amount. But you're not moving in with me. Ever." Her eyes flashed, hurt, mixing with disbelief. "That's your idea of help? That's what I can offer, without losing the stability I fought for. Take it or leave it." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, finally, she nodded. We spent the rest of that coffee shop meeting circling the same ground. Her justifying, me holding the line. At one point, she even said, "I never thought you'd be so hard." "I never thought I'd have to be," I replied. But here we are. By the time we stood to leave, we had an uneasy agreement. I would help her research senior housing and guide her through the application process. She would attend therapy with me as a condition of my ongoing support. I'd contribute a modest monthly amount toward her expenses. Just enough to make sure she wasn't destitute, not enough for her to lean on me the way she had for years. Neither of us was thrilled with the arrangement, but it was the only one I could live with. Over the next few weeks, I kept my word. We toured small apartments in independent living communities, most of them far humbler than the house she'd sold. She hated the cramped layouts, the thin walls, the lack of privacy. "It's small," she said, as we stepped into one of the better units at Pine Meadows. "So was my first apartment," I told her, thinking of the peeling paint and rattling fridge. "You adapt." She didn't miss the parallel. For maybe the first time, she understood what it felt like to be forced into a downsized life, with no warning. The move-in day was quiet. No siblings, no neighbors stopping by. Just me, a hired mover, and a woman who seemed a little more fragile than the one who had stood in my driveway months ago with her arms crossed. Therapy together was awkward at first. She came defensive, ready to explain rather than listen. But over time, her posture softened. In one session, she admitted, "My mother was even more controlling than I was. I thought I was doing better. Maybe I wasn't. It wasn't an excuse, but it was context. And context helped me heal in ways I didn't expect. I stuck to my boundaries. She called more often, but I didn't pick up every time. I visited, but not on demand. We talked about neutral things. Her new neighbors, a book she was reading, a recipe she'd tried. Slowly, our conversations stopped being battlegrounds. Meanwhile, my own life kept moving forward. My promotion had given me breathing room financially, and for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine something bigger than just getting by. A year after the driveway ambush, I signed the papers for a small condo in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. Standing alone in the empty living room with the keys in my hand, I thought about the day I'd driven away from my family home. The car, full of trash bags. The lump in my throat. The feeling that everything I'd known had been ripped away. And now, here I was, unlocking a door that was entirely mine. No one could take this space from me. No one could question whether I belonged here. I invited the people who had been my lifeline. Zoe and Tyler, my co-workers, a few friends from therapy group. Kevin came too, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that looked like genuine respect. Zoe raised her glass to Leah, who turned garbage bags into a gorgeous home through sheer determination. Laughter filled the room. Not the brittle kind I'd grown up with, but the warm kind that comes from people who actually want to see you happy. In the months that followed, I started something I'd been thinking about since those first dark nights in my studio apartment. A small fund for young adults leaving toxic family situations. It wasn't huge, but it could cover a security deposit, a month of rent, a set of work clothes, the kind of practical help I wished I'd had when I was hauling my life in plastic bags to Zoe's apartment. One recipient wrote to me, "Your help got me out of a bad situation. I'm safe now. Thank you." My therapist smiled when I told her. "You've turned your pain into purpose," she said. And she was right. What had started as betrayal had become the thing that pushed me to build a life on my own terms. My relationship with my mother would never be what it was before. I didn't want it to be. The old dynamic was built on control and conditional approval. What we had now was imperfect, but it was healthier. Two adults navigating boundaries, sometimes clumsily, sometimes with grace. One afternoon, during our last therapy session of the year, she looked at me and said, "I'm proud of you, not because you're successful, though you are. I'm proud of who you've become." It was the kind of thing I'd spent years waiting to hear. But in that moment, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Her approval was nice. It wasn't essential. That was the real change. I left the session lighter, walking into the late Texas sun with a sense of quiet peace. Sometimes the people who break you are the same people who taught you how to survive. And sometimes survival turns into something even greater. A life you built entirely for yourself. A life no one else can claim or control. So if you've ever been pushed out of a place you thought was home, maybe it's not the ending it feels like. Maybe it's the start of the story you were meant to live all along.